It is such a great honor. So Pankaj, if you are ready, can we start so that we can start the recording of the dialogue?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Okay, okay. Uh, very good afternoon from India. Uh, this is around 3 p.m. here, and what I believe it is around 6:30 in Japan. Uh, it is such a wonderful occasion and a wonderful opportunity that we are here for this series which Gandhi Smriti and Darshan Samiti, the National Memorial of Mahatma Gandhi, has initiated as part of Dialogue on Mediation series. Today is the 10th dialogue that we are having. Actually, Gandhi Smriti and Darshan Samiti has initiated a major program to promote mediation here in India, which entails major focusing mainly on community mediation and peer mediation. And as part of the dialogue on mediation series, what we are doing is we are interviewing, we are having dialogue with senior people from all across the world to gather and capture different essence of ideas of mediation. In this context, today we have with us a very senior person from Poland, Maciej Witek. Also, before I introduce Maciej, I must thank my friend Elizabeth. In fact, quite a large number of these dialogue that we have been doing, thanks to Elizabeth for her connect for facilitating it. Also, for your information, Maciej, all what we are trying to do is after this interviews, this dialogues, we transcribe these dialogues, and we will be using, of course, the recording for our participants of the various training program on mediation. Plus also we are trying to put together a course material on community mediation. So all these will be transcribed and put as the reading material. So this is such a valuable kind of a dialogue that we are having, which will be actually get featured in the course structure that we are trying to have as part of mediation online. It will be an online course that we are launching on mediation. So for today's session, we really thank Maciej Witek, who is essentially from Poland but now based in Japan, for agreeing to join us for this dialogue on mediations series. That is, as I said, this is series number 10. And we have had the honor of having dialogues with people right from Latin America to the Europe and various other Africa and of course Asia. In fact, Maciej has a master's degree in international relations from Tokyo International University. In fact, Maciej has been doing a very incredible work of interviewing mediators from different countries for the mediators without borders. In fact, I have read quite a number of your interviews, Maciej, and they were really exciting and interesting. And we really hope to gain from your own experience of interviewing mediators. Also, Maciej has basically has a lot of interest in the role of culture in international relations, in the human rights issues, and as well as mediation in our daily lives. With a strong belief that proper education can solve a lot of future generations' problem. Also, Maciej has been serving as a team leader for Global Education Project and supports exchange activities between Poland and Japan. So we would, I am sure, get a lot of interesting focus and ideas on mediation in Poland also. Also, the person who is going to conduct this dialogue today, of course, I'm there, but mainly it will be Mansi Sharma. She's an expert on mediation, and she is in fact doing her PhD on mediation through nonviolent communication from one of the universities here in India. And she has done extensive work on the issues of mediation, family mediation, and all. So Mansi is there. Thank you, Mansi, for joining. Also, of course, a special thanks I should give to Elizabeth for facilitating this, and I'm sure we will have a very exciting session interaction today with some really interesting uh, uh, pointers to this whole idea of mediation at a global level. So, Maciej, if you're ready, we start the dialogue now. And the first question which I would really like to put before you is, you see, you have been interviewing a lot of mediators. I've read quite a number of your interviews in the website of the Mediators Without Borders. Could you please share your views on some of the emerging trends in mediation across the world, and some in specific countries, and also in the context of this pandemic that we are going through, many of the mediators one has talked to, they're talking about the predominant, importance of emerging importance of online mediation. So, could you share your views and ideas on the emerging trends in mediation at a global level? Maciej, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much for this amazing introduction. So one more time, my name is Maciej. I am from Poland, but I'm based in Japan at the moment. And yes, as it was said before, I happen to interview many mediators for the organization Mediators Beyond Borders. Well, unfortunately, the weather is so unfortunate today. There is very heavy rain. I hope everybody can hear me properly. So what about my experience with mediation and with interviewing those people and the current trends in mediation? I am personally very interested in culture in mediation. So what is the role of culture in our world in mediation? So sometimes the most important core of who we are depends on our cultural background. For everything can be relative, maybe not everything, but many people are relative. It depends on your country of origin or your country that you currently live in. It's of course not, we should not fall into that extreme that nothing is wrong, but culture of course plays a huge role in how we behave and what to believe and how we interact with each other and what do we expect in conflict resolution and mediation. And sometimes even the little things and gestures might be perceived completely differently by people from different backgrounds and interpreted as polite or offensive. And my general opinion as a person who studies culture, who have some experience of interacting with people from different cultural backgrounds, is that very, very often, unfortunately, people tend to ignore or overlook those small cultural details, and it can actually create a conflict sometimes. And sometimes people do not recognize that, but sometimes the conflict can arise simply from the cultural background and the differences how we perceive various things. So culture is we can how to say it? Well, many things depends on our culture, like how do we understand dispute, what values do we have, what is worthy and what is meaningful, also the norms that are acceptable behaviors. And what can I say? That I can tell you maybe couple of qualities that a good cultural mediator should possess that I learned through the interviews with fellow mediators. And first of all is self-awareness, the capacity to be surprised and willingness to learn new things, because I believe we never stop learning in our lives. The second thing is an awareness of the importance of reflection, the ability to question our assumptions about the world and reflect on our experiences. Also, an understanding of cross-cultural communication patterns. So we need to recognize some things that are common for certain cultures, like the importance of smile, the tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, etc., etc. We also need to understand, we also need to have a good understanding of the relationships between language, culture, and power, and the ability to accommodate the cultural habits of others and be very flexible and open-minded towards others. And while answering your questions about the mediation in current situation during the COVID pandemic, well, of course, everything went online. So probably additional trait that would be very welcomed in today's world is adaptivity to new technologies. So we can communicate clearly via Zoom or other programs that that provide us with communication between countries.
Perfect. So, in fact, in that context, what I gather from what you were saying, that for a good, successful mediator, being culturally literate, cultural literacy is something very,
Yes.
very important. So that is an extremely critical trait to be learned as a good mediator. Well, now I request Mansi to kindly share her questions for you. Mansi, if you're ready, please, can you start your questions? Hello, Mansi.
Yes, sir.
Can you
Thank you,
hear?
sir.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Please make yourself
Yes,
visible,
sir.
please, for a, yeah.
Right, sir. I'm doing that, sir. Hello, Maciej, sir. Well,
Hello.
you have already answered. You have begun with something very, very crucial because your interest is in human rights and culture. So I would like that since you're working with women, which is the name itself is Creators Beyond Borders, and you have already mentioned that it is that cultural sensitivity for a mediator should be culturally sensitive. But when we talk about international organizations, there will be people coming from different backgrounds who are going to work as mediators. Then how do they actually understand the cultures of people who are in the conflicting zones? How do they relate to these cultures because they are not natural to them? So what kind of special understanding is done by the international mediators in order to ensure that they are doing justice in terms of the culture which belongs to the conflicting parties?
Mm-hmm. For mediators who are
Sir,
interacting
there is
with,
a problem.
sorry, you want to add
Yes,
something?
please carry on.
Okay.
Please
Okay.
carry on.
So for mediators who interact with members of other countries, with representatives of other cultures and everything, how to overcome the obstacles that can appear on your way to international mediation. I believe, like, first of all, you need to be a very open-minded person. You need to accept the differences around the world, as I mentioned probably before, like something that is very like the basic truth for me can be very, very difficult to understand for somebody from different cultural background, from different part of the world. So we need to understand that everything is kind of relevant in that field of culture. And I think two very important things that we have to keep in mind, that we have to avoid. First of all is avoiding stereotypes. Well, that's we should keep in mind in every sphere of our life, of course, but in mediation there is especially important. So it is really important to find about the perception that other people have about themselves and that we have about ourselves. So what are the common things and what are our differences? And we need to be very, very we need to avoid making any assumptions about other people, because people might identify very differently than we accept them. Of course, there are those cultural norms that in some way will apply to representatives of specific countries, specific cultures, but those might not apply to every single person who live in the certain country, of course. So if you are treating somebody in a very stereotypical way, we might just start another conflict. And what also we should keep in mind, I think it's looking for common ground. and common approach to a certain conflict or any situation. Because there are some situations that people, I don't want to use the word abandon their cultural background, but they tend to, if they have a common problem, they tend to focus on that common problem instead of what our culture says. So if they have some shared experience with each other that allows them to connect. For example, one of the mediators that who I interviewed very recently mentioned a situation when you have to mediate between two representatives of cultures that are very stereotypically different. Let's say it's somebody from Japan and somebody from Brazil. So you have to apply very different approach to them, to both of them. And what happens if both of them happen to be parents with little kids? So they, in that situation, they seem to share a common experience. So maybe they recently spent the whole night taking care of their newborn babies, and maybe they are tired at the moment of mediation. So by identifying that common ground, we can kind of find something that is common for them, and allow them to connect on that experience. So they might be willing to agree during the mediation to find a solution.
Right. Since connection is very important in mediation, and to communication channel that we connect, then communication, the way we communicate are different from country to country, from people to people, from culture to culture. Though communication is very essential in mediation and the basic principles remain the same, but is there something apart from the basic principles of communication in mediation in general, which we need for international mediation? Is there something more than just mediation, which is the communication related to mediation, which is required at some international platform? What are the essentials of communication according to you at any international platform for mediation?
Well, the essential of communications are, I think I already mentioned that, like avoiding stereotypes, being open-minded, and just willing to accept, willing to get out of your comfort zone, definitely, to learn about something new that you never experienced, that you never heard of before. I think I would say those are the essentials, interacting with representatives of other countries.
While going through your profile, I came across your interest area, which of course include culture and then a study of human rights, and also education is an area which you're interested in. So we have by far witnessed that education, or peace education in particular, has not been emphasized in the decades which have gone by. So do you think if laying emphasis on peace education can change the entire scenario of conflict resolution, and something as like which is taken to be as trivial, like nobody focuses on peace education as such because they believe that the moral qualities instead will do for what is required for peace? So emphasizing on peace education, do you think it has some role in international mediation if peace education is included as a subject in studies, whether it be colleges or schools?
Yes, I definitely think if we include the peace education, it should definitely be included in our basic programs of education. Well, in general, I think that the proper education, if we can educate our younger generation like properly and make them aware of the problems of contemporary world, I really believe they will and they can, and hopefully they will create the world that we will not have those problems anymore. So this is really, the education is really the area that everybody should get involved in at some point. And yes, regarding the education, I can tell you the story of one of the mediators that I interviewed also some time ago. So he got inspired for going into mediation by one of his professors, and by actually participating in one mediation process. And it was exactly it was in while he was exchange student in America. And the case was that there were two people arguing over cash. It was $1,500, and they decided to go to the court over those $1,500, and it took them almost 2 years. And of course, they didn't settle it. They didn't settle that dispute yet over 2 years. So they were more willingly to go to the court to pay the expenses of the traditional court. And of course, it didn't work. And the person who I interviewed said that when he and his professor started mediation, so tried a different approach with them, with that mediator approach, they were able to solve that case in just 4 hours and make those people friends again. And they agreed to pay back the amount of money, etc., etc. But the point was, by educating people that such things are possible and showing them examples of those, we can definitely spark that interest of going into mediation and getting more interested into peace building. And I generally believe that the role of teachers, especially in that very early stages of education, are actually to inspire people more than teach us some specific knowledge. Because if you get inspired, then it's very good, and your job as a teacher is done. And one more thing that I can mention also when we are talking about education, I always had that idea that the going for an exchange abroad should be a global standard everywhere. And many mediators who I interviewed, they usually agree with me, because if you go for exchange, then you interact with other cultures, then you learn about them, you learn about different approaches to many things, also peace building, and you can expand your knowledge. And for many people that I met, going for exchange abroad, including me, was a very life-changing experience.
What according to you, Maciej, and the trends? No, we see a lot of trends in towards online mediation. So can you give us some kind of understanding of what's happening at the international level on online mediation, the challenges, the strength and weaknesses of strength and weaknesses? So online mediation, strength and weaknesses, and how it is moving forward from your own experience. If you could share your thoughts on that, please.
Mm-hmm. Online mediation. So, well, of course, I think one strength will be that it's available at the moment during the pandemic, when we cannot really go and visit each other and conduct that mediation in the field, if I can say this. So we can communicate. So if we have easy access to each other, no matter where do we live. But when I talk about some limitations, I think the main limitation is that while we are conducting mediation, we should actually go somewhere and experience the situation of the person that we are working with, because while conducting mediation online, we are connected, of course, but we are still kind of separated. We can see that only on our computer screens, and this is completely different than actually going to another country, actually talking with a person, with a live human being. And and especially when the two sides that are participating in mediation are also located in different parts of the world, and if they're also connecting with each other online, I think that is much more difficult to conduct that kind of mediation when they cannot actually get into one room, sit at the one table, and talk face to face. So how does it move forward? You also asked. I think it depends on how the situation with pandemic evolves, because if the international travel and everything will resume soon, I think we can just proceed with that normal mediation face to face. I hope so. So I'm not sure if I can provide a clear answer to that.
Thank you. In fact, we are all hoping for the same. Coming to another question, justice delayed is justice denied. Timely access to justice is very significant and it is a basic human right. So, do you think the ADR, the alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, are more fairer and do they ensure more dignity to humans than the finite solutions offered by the courtrooms? If so, in what ways do you think they are more fair and more convincing and convenient for the people?
Yes, I think they definitely bring more dignity and are generally better for people who are in dispute, because like mediation is, or maybe let me rephrase it. I mean, traditional dispute resolutions, at least I have that opinion, that view, that it's mostly about like prove ourselves right, just prove one side right, and very often also punish the other one. So just one side is right, is ultimately right, second one is ultimately wrong. And I think mediation is more about bringing people together, bringing them along, trying to resolve something, trying to understand and trying to reach common goal that would be beneficial for both sides. And what mediators who are interviewed, many of them were lawyers previously, before they got interested in mediation, but many of them mentioned that while being a lawyer, they felt that they there is only so much that they can do, that they at some point they just hit that border, and sometimes even in the best case scenario, the most they could do is like win the money or something like this, or something else, but they wouldn't really do anything to repair, for example, the relationships between the two sides. So I think mediation is more about repairing something than just pointing out who is right and who is wrong and punishing people.
Thank you. My next question is, what role does behavioral science or neuro-linguistic programming play at some international level? Because in neuro-linguistic programming or behavioral science is very important in the process of mediation. But then when we come to international mediation, there will be a difference in understanding the cultures. And then again, what people are doing cannot be easily understood because there may be cultural specific reactions. So how come how this behavioral science remains relevant at international mediations, at international platforms? And also, is there anything in particular one needs to take care of while understanding these behaviors while mediating internationally?
So yes, I definitely agree that neurolinguistics and behavioral science plays really big role in mediation, because thanks to that we can learn how, like our behavior and other human beings, we can learn about the patterns of behaviors of certain people, that is it can be very beneficial for us to understand and avoid certain mistakes in certain situations. But I sometimes I'm a little afraid that those sciences can I mean you still have to keep in mind that you cannot really generalize. And I am sometimes afraid that if you just read about that, you have that theoretical knowledge, that scientific knowledge about the examples of certain behavior patterns, you sometimes might fall into the trap of generalizing, and then the stereotypization comes, and this is a problem. Then so we need to pay attention to behavioral sciences, of course, but we also need to keep in mind that there are a lot of exceptions from those rules in international environment, because as I mentioned before, some even scientific examples can be adapted to one certain country, but in other country it can be completely wrong and completely different.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Have you read about Gandhian principles of truth and nonviolence? And
Yes.
if yes, do you find these principles relevant in the context of international mediation?
Yes, of course, especially the non-violence path, because I think that's the main point of mediation, to avoid violence. As I mentioned before in one of the previous questions, like traditional way sometimes just wants to punish somebody and just prove somebody right, prove somebody wrong. But in with that in mediation, with that approach to trying to gain something for both of those sides, and to avoid like non-essential violence. And because in the traditional way, sometimes if okay, no, let me rephrase that. If we declare that one side of the conflict is ultimately true and one side is ultimately wrong, then that might lead to another conflict. So instead, if you don't try to gain something for both sides of conflict, then you can create like another conflict, and that will lead to violence, I believe. So the point of mediation is to end the conflict for both sides. So sometimes instead of trying to resolve the conflict, people want to prove that they are right instead of actually gaining something and resolving it. And it can produce more hatred and violence. And that violence is might be just a product of that misunderstanding.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have you been following any particular style of mediation to overcome these misunderstandings which may arise and which may lead to conflicts? For example, there are three prominent styles of mediation: evaluative, transformative, and facilitative. And the other day we were doing a session on mixed mediation, mixed style of mediation. So is there any particular style of mediation which has worked for you at the international platforms? Is there some universal mechanism which you have been following while going through international mediation?
To be honest, I don't think that there is any universal mechanism, because everything can be adapted to like specific situation. But something that I can bring up here is also a result of one of my interviews with a mediator. His name is Henry Jampolski, who came up with something called dissolving conflict from within. And this is his special like form that says, like the theory that says that the conflict actually comes from our emotions. And what he told me during the interview is that everything in our lives and in those conflicts comes from a certain narrative, and there are certain elements that create that narrative. And sometimes people sometimes we accumulate a lot of our negative emotions, and when the conflict arises, the other people, our opponents, are sometimes like a matches that can just set us on fire and we explode. And his approach was to learn how to learn to look like within us and try to control our emotions. And how did he phrase it? Let me quote that we need to learn to decide whether those matches will fall into gasoline or water. So this is all that process is happening within us, and this is actually what I really loved when I heard about that approach from Henry during our interview some time ago.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So, yes, sir.
No, I wanted a question basically which was coming to my mind. You know, like you're from Poland, and what are your understanding of the trends in mediation in European countries and especially in your own home country of Poland?
You know, to be honest, I recently just started my journey into mediation. So if you want to ask me about exactly what is happening in Poland in that field of mediation, I to be honest, I don't know. But while being in Poland and while starting my studies, I actually never heard about mediation. So I don't think mediation is very popular in Poland. That approach to gain something for both sides, I think it's in Poland is more focus on proving somebody wrong and somebody right instead of finding a common ground.
Okay, the litigation, basically the focus is on litigation as we might understand. Okay, Mansi, please continue your questions.
So the concern remains the same as you have mentioned that in Poland, mediation is not that popular and people do not prefer using it. Instead, they will prefer going to the courtrooms. So since you have experience of being a mediator, if you could please suggest us some measures to make the alternate dispute redressal mechanism such as mediation popular amongst the people and also amongst the lawyers, because people have been neglecting these speedier as well as hassle-free processes to obtain justice. So, are there any measures in your eyes which can actually help in making these mechanisms more popular and more liked by the general masses?
What can make mediation more popular? Well, definitely educating people, of course, about the possibility of mediation, showing that the examples of some cases that mediation was much more efficient than the traditional approach. And I think what is very important is to getting people open to new things and new experiences in general, because well, I last time I've been in Poland 4 years ago, so some things might change since that time. But when I left, I remember that that country was not really that open to the rest of the world. So I would this is something that I already talked about, introducing that that international exchange of students as a standard. So if people can go abroad, experience the life abroad, learn about different cultures and different approaches, then they can just accept them more easily. Something that is new. Because if you live in the country that is very homogeneous, not many minorities, like most of the people have the same approach to certain aspects of life, then you are not really exposed to those new experiences. So just go out, get out, convince people to get out of their comfort zones. Let them see something different. Let them experience that, and then they will be more open to try something new, like mediation.
Thank you. Since you've already mentioned that non-violence is very important in mediation, the principles should be followed. So, what role do you think non-violent communication has to play in mediation, and what are the essentials of non-violent communication in your eyes for the process of mediation to be successful?
For non-violent communication, I think I would mention patience, maybe as a trait that we all should have to avoid conflicts and to avoid violence. Empathy for others, to understand different point of view, and just be very open-minded to accept the differences between us. I think if you mix those three, like patience, empathy, and open-mindedness, I think that those are the essentials for non-violent communication, and to have that attitude to understand each other and look for common ground instead of our differences.
We can't hear you.
So you're
Unmute
muted.
yourself.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Since you have mentioned that empathy is very important to the process of mediation, and of course, empathy forms one of the basic essentials of non-violent communication. So, whenever a person is empathetic, and whenever there is a place for emotions in any process, may it be mediation, there is every possibility of some biases might creep into the process. So, how can a mediator keep away those biases? And also, how can he handle the emotions of the parties involved in the conflict?
Well, so in terms of biases, I think it's very important to understand correctly what is the essence of the problem. So, for example, before starting the mediation, I would suggest to talk with each side separately and listen to their opinions, their positions, what is their approach, to understand both of those sides equally. And just understand the views of both of those sides and understand what the nature of conflict is, and of course look for the common ground, and how to avoid emotions. Well, I think this is something that we just have to learn, and we just have to practice to not be too emotional in certain situations. I don't think there is any correct answer to these questions. It just comes to you with practice, by interacting with people.
Thank you. Since the essentials which you have mentioned, like controlling emotions, needs a lot of practice. So by default, it appears to me that the profession of mediator is is meant for people who are highly trained or skillful. And the people who are just born with a community mindset or mediation mindset are not meant for it. They need to be trained into these particular skills so as to become good mediators. What is your opinion on this? Can people in general be good mediators, or they need to be highly trained, and in particular when they are undertaking some international mediation, in order to become good mediators?
Yes, I believe that the training is really crucial in becoming a good mediator. And maybe not only training but also experience. So you need to have like complete a good training and like have a, because some things and skills just come to you with experience when you just well, for example, let me bring up an example of myself, maybe not as a mediator, but as a student of a major of cultural studies. So I completed my course of study on culture in Poland, and I had that all that theoretical knowledge, some practice still done in Poland. But what actually allowed me to learn about culture is coming to Japan, interacting with people, and gaining that experience of like being in that environment of being surrounded by people representing different cultures, different backgrounds. So for me, definitely that the course of my studies was not yet enough to okay, maybe not, I'm not an expert yet, but to become closer to being an expert on culture. That the experience that I gained through traveling, through learning abroad, studying abroad, through living here, this is what was the most important, I think. So I would say to be a good mediator, you need the training and you need a lot of experience.
But then both of these essentials seem impossible in the present times, when we all around the world we are going through the pandemic, and we are not that hopeful that it will end very soon. So the upcoming mediators who have joined the profession recently and who have started with their mediations during the times of pandemic, what hope do they have? They cannot actually travel to the lands uh, far across the world. Like you have mentioned that you got trained into you got culturally sensitive once you visited different countries. But the mediators who are mediating online, who have no access to far off lands, what is the hope for them to turn into very successful and good mediators?
Well, the major hope for them is that the pandemic will end soon and we'll all be able to move around as we did before. Well, but if online mediation is available at the moment, they should of course use that experience of that online mediation provides. Of course, if it's not perfect, but for the moment, this is all we have. So let's just use whatever means we have right now, and let's hope we can actually move to other parts of the world as soon as possible. So
Amen.
it's always, whatever you are, whatever you do, just use every means possible to gain experience.
That's absolutely no other option. Yeah.
Right, sir. If you could please share some experience of online mediation with us, any interesting case story which will benefit us, so that we can also understand what are the basics which are required in online mediation. And it will be of great help to the students who are, sir has already mentioned that we are going to come up with a coursework. So people will also know how to deal with online mediations. If you could please share some experience of online mediation with us.
Well, I mean, my experience in mediation comes from the interviews, actually. So, well, the examples that I have that I collected during my interviews are not really specified if those were online mediation or not. But what would I suggest to pay attention to during online mediation, online meetings, and generally communication online is like make sure that everybody can hear you clearly, that you can communicate clearly. Well, those basic actually that you have, that your equipment is enough to handle the clear communication, because if you cannot talk clearly to someone else, well, then you will have a lot of misunderstandings. So I think that's all what I can say at the moment.
That's right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. If anyone else has any question
Yeah,
with us.
yes, the floor is open. In fact, we have uh, some law professors also with us. Aditi and Sthiti, they are teaching in different law colleges, universities in India. So, if you have any questions for Maciej, so that would be wonderful. Uh, and of course, even from Elizabeth, because she has been also been a versatile person talking to mediators from all across the world. So anyone having any questions, the floor is open now for discussions. Yes. In
Uh,
fact,
so there, there
in
is
fact, before I hand over to someone who is asking the question, the same question which Mansi asked to Maciej on this whole issue of online mediation, in case Elizabeth also can share some of her own experience, that would be wonderful, because that is something which is now in. And possibly if Elizabeth can help in someone, also a future interview with someone who is a specialist in online mediation, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about online mediation. Maciej has been a wonderful kind of example for me in terms of how to approach these interviews. But one occasion for online mediation is one mentor of mine, his name is Charles Crumpton, a very well-established mediator in Hawaii. He he was mediating a family dispute, and this family had a business that they were really wanting to see how it was going to be distributed after the death of their father. And so for him, they entered the room, right? And as soon as they entered the room, everybody was in different rooms. And what he did was he put them in different breakout rooms on purpose. So he said, okay, I'm going to put the daughter and the mother on this breakout room. I'm going to do this on this other breakout room, and I'm going to time them, right? And so when he did this, he was able to then separate the group, still digitally, and jump through all the groups, check in
Okay.
slowly and gradually come back. So he was really able to understand who he's going to pair up, how the breakout rooms work. And he said that it was lovely because when they came back together after they had maybe 10 minutes together, they felt a bit more intimate, right? That they actually had a turn to talk. And he said, okay, so breakout room number 1, what was the summary? Breakout room number 2 and breakout room number 3, and then coming together and talking about, okay, what can we do? Like what are some of your ideas? Then that really helped, right? And he said that this wasn't just one day, right? It took about maybe 2 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks, but a week to really get settled in the basics, because there were people who didn't know about technology, there were people who knew a lot. So it's slow, but I think the way that he was able to solve this dispute virtually was really, really inspiring. But that's one person. I know Maciej might have gotten people who are actually still in person working with people on the ground. I just remember this one example from one of my mentors. But that's just one quick example.
Okay, thank you. There was someone who was asking question. I don't remember who was that. Hello.
so I was mainly concerned with the online mediation only, but I think that part is already answered just now. So
Okay,
I'm just fine with.
okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question from anyone? In case, because we are through with our set of questions, with our set of Yes, Elizabeth?
I have a question for Maciej on culture. What happens when you come from different cultures? You know, there are mediators that I know that were born in South Africa, raised in France, worked in Germany, whose parents are half Indian, half Japanese. You know, you get this mixture within the heart of a mediator, and you also get people who may look like they're from Japan, for example, but really in their heart they're French. You know, they feel more comfortable speaking French than they do speaking Japanese. And so when you get these layers of culture and you're working in a mediation setting, kind of what are the things that some of the questions you ask to further be able to understand this person before you say, okay, this is a Japanese, I've worked with Japanese people in the past, but you really say, okay, this is a Japanese, but really it's really French guy. And the values are different, right? So how do you do that? And how do you maximize that for a really good mediation outcome to come about? What are the questions like, and maybe what are the things you prepare for in advance?
Well, I think the most simple question would be just asking them about their backgrounds, because if you are involved in mediation when you can just physically see that those people are from two different parts of the world, you definitely need to get as many information from them as possible, because in that mixed in that case, it's possible that even the conflict, that even the source of conflict might be a result of their misunderstanding when people with such a diverse cultural background come together. So somebody that I interviewed recently just told me that when he is mediating, and when there are representative of other cultures, he just asks, just ask a simple questions, just to tell him everything. And I think being straightforward in that situation is the best option. Just ask those people about their background.
One question which is related to what Elizabeth asked, and in fact, this can be open to both Elizabeth and Maciej, is that when you are mediating, for instance, let us say that I'm giving you a hypothetical example. Say I am a mediator and I'm mediating with say a person, someone in Spain and someone in another country, and that person, in fact, I've been interestingly enough, have been requesting Elizabeth to give me lessons in Spanish. And I was happened to be in a meeting of very senior research scholars and professors the other day, a closed door meeting, you can say, and no one was speaking in English. They were all speaking in Spanish. And of course, one professor was translating what I was saying. And so in the context of mediation, say, for instance, I am mediating and say, Elizabeth is speaking only in Spanish, and say Maciej is speaking in some other language. There is Mansi who is translating for me for what Elizabeth is speaking and what Maciej is speaking. This is international mediation. So how can a mediator, my question is that how can a mediator, because I have to have complete faith in what Mansi is trying to interpret the issues uh, for me, for what Elizabeth is speaking. It is possible that she might have a totally different perspective, whereas she may not be a mediator. She may be just an interpreter, because she may be just an interpreter whom I am sort of employed to help me in understanding what Elizabeth is speaking. So what are these real challenges of understanding when we are talking of culture and language and those kind of issues? How can a good mediator overcome these challenges? Because for me it is a real challenge, because I really don't know what exactly Elizabeth is speaking and what are her issues, what are her concern. I have totally rely on Mansi. Similarly, and so how do I mediate? I might get biased. I might have that issues of stereotyping. I might fall into a trap of, say, moralistic judgment. I might fall into a trap of, say, negative evaluative language, so on and so forth, because I'm not understanding their culture. I'm not understanding the language. So how does a mediator overcome such situations?
I think in that situation, it would be very good to discuss everything with your interpreter or translator, the person who is providing translation, because there are different ways of translating, I believe, and some interpreters might want to translate like every single word like very correctly, very detailed, and some wants to focus on just translating the general message that the person wanted to convey. And it's I think I would make sure that I actually understand what is the translation style of the person who is responsible for my translation. And I think if you knew ahead that you're mediating like between two people from using certain languages, I think I would just look up some general information about those languages, trying to expand my knowledge ahead of mediation.
Okay.
I think this is what I would suggest.
That's right. Perfect.
And I think adding to what Maciej said, I think Maciej hits the heart, right? Really look at your translator, right? Look at the interpreter. But something also interesting would be it's often 90% of what people say and 10% of how they say it, or at least how they communicate it, right? And in that sense, if you look at it, I think thinking about silence is so powerful, right? When you're silent in a room, it has more power than actual words. So really being strategic with silence per se is something that I know Maciej to me talks a lot about in his reflections on his mediation sessions. And another thing is also it's really simple, but it's metaphors, right? Maybe your level of English is here, my level of English is here, my level of Spanish is everywhere, but we all understand metaphors to the most basic, right? So if you're able to maybe talk about a conflict, and this is often what a lot of psychologists did whenever they were whenever they were working with clients. Actually, you're using a simple object to describe an issue, and this in a larger sense talks about the problem in there, right? For example, if maybe Maciej and I are in a dispute because he goes ahead and signs off all the agreements without asking me, right? So now we're talking to a mediator. Maciej doesn't understand me. So maybe the mediator then gives me a good analogy, right? The analogy could be, so Maciej, imagine you are a Ferrari, yeah? You're a Ferrari, a beautiful car, right? And Elizabeth wants to be a Ferrari, but she's a rocket, right? A Ferrari and a rocket are fast vehicles, but they're different. They have completely different speeds. And so in that sense, I know we're breaking it down from the very basic, a basic car example, but then this really, really resonates with you, right? So metaphors and silence. And as Maciej said, really maybe taking initiative to look up certain words because people appreciate it. Maciej is from Poland. I know a couple words, Polish words, but we're in Japan, right? So if we know a little bit of Japanese, and Japanese people are so grateful, even if you know the basics like arigato gozaimasu, sumimasen, right? They say, oh, this person has really put the effort. So I think those two things I would add to the really good response that Maciej talked about, which is this building trust with your interpreter, right?
Something that I would like to add about specific languages, I think that would be very valuable, especially in case of Japanese. It's good to be aware that how to say it. In certain languages, you use a lot of words and a lot of talking to pass very, very short message. And in some others, you talk a lot and you actually provide a lot of information. But the Japanese is very specific in that sense that a person can talk a lot, and that will be very, very little content in that. Um, I like to present examples from the movies. Do you know the movie Lost in Translation with Bill Murray? Probably. So there is that one scene that I remember very clearly when the character played by Bill Murray is in Japan, and he has a personal interpreter. I don't remember what he's doing, but the Japanese person is talking a lot, and the interpreter is saying to Bill Murray just yes or something like this, something very short, and Bill Murray doesn't know like what did he say, what happened, and this is when I saw that movie, I remember that I thought that this is so real about certain situations in Japan. So I believe you need to have that basic understanding how the language works, and you need to trust your interpreter, and
Fine. That's fine. So, is there any other question for Maciej? We have an excellent insight to, especially in the context of culture, because that's an area which is something very, very critical and important. Whether even in a country like a diverse country like India, where we have a very huge pluralism and understanding of each other's culture is something very, very important in the context of mediation. If the mediator doesn't understand the language, doesn't understand the ethos, the body language that two conflicting parties are trying to, portray, the probably the mediator may not be able to do the best of jobs. So I think it has been beautifully put by Maciej, and it has been a good learning thing. So in our course, as I and Mansi are trying to put together this course material on uh, community mediation, I think that is something, a significant aspect that we need to put in. And this is going to be a very important aspect of it, which Marcia has said today. So it is such a wonderful talking to you. And as usual and as always, I'm always really thankful to my friend Elizabeth for helping with these connections. She has been like the pillar behind this dialogue on mediation series. So I can tell you, Elizabeth, everyone in Gandhi Smriti knows you by now, and as someone who is like someone who is helping and this whole efforts, and I'm sure you will be helping us further in this, in our endeavor to promote this whole idea and a culture of mediation, as I say. So, and in fact, I shared with you two of our law teachers are here today, Aditi and Sthiti. They're teaching different subjects of law. So you will find some interesting questions also. So thank you once again. Thank you, Mansi, for those wonderful questions, and
Thank you, sir.
everyone. Thank you very much. So, any other final word from any one of you before we sign off? Anyone wanting to give any final word?
I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity. It was amazing to be here today and talk with you, exchange the views, that I could share something. I think this is the first time that I'm participating in a project like this, so it was a very nice experience.
See, you have been in the business of interviewing others, and this was a reverse kind of a thing where you were interviewed by people. So
Yes,
it is
yes,
something
exactly.
in that context. So thank you very much. It was for your precious time, everyone of you, and I'm sure we will meet again and continue our work further. Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
sir. Thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth. Thank you, Maciej.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
Aditi,
you.
Sthiti, and
Thank you,
Manjuji,
Aditi.
who are the, yeah, yeah. Thank you.